Hi, everybody, and welcome to Unified, a podcast feed from First Church Belmont Unitarian Universalist. We'll be sharing sermons and stories, especially thematic content made new every week. We're so glad you're here, and for more information about who we are and opportunities to grow and deepen, swing by the church on Sundays or check out our website at uubelmont.org. And for now, enjoy this new content.
Good morning. It is good to be back in Belmont and joy to worship with my good colleague, the Reverend Jablonski. Thank you to all those who've contributed to the worship service this morning, the music, the words. And I also want to let you know that my colleague Maggie from the Urban Ministry is also here with me, and she'll be in coffee hour to answer any questions that you may have after the service. So you may know, or may not, that Belmont is one of 45 Unitarian Universalist congregations from around Greater Boston that are connected to the work of the Urban Ministry as our members. And the Urban Ministry was founded 200 years ago by a Unitarian minister who was striving for social justice in Boston with a combined power of Unitarian congregations. And congregations like this one continue to play an important role in our work to dismantle racism and advance racial, social, and economic justice. Today, in 2025, the Urban Ministry has a youth program that serves BIPOC high school students from Boston. We have a domestic violence shelter renewal house that you heard mentioned earlier that serves families who are rebuilding their lives. And we partner with Roxbury businesses and nonprofit organizations, bringing Unitarian Universalist congregations with the Roxbury community together to work for change. Our Belmont delegates to the Urban Ministry are David Deese, who I saw, and Sean Westgate, and they work to share information between us to keep us connected, and I thank them for their service. Our history with Belmont is long and deep. So a number of years ago, Belmont helped us to create a computer lab for high school students at the Urban Ministry. Does anybody remember being part of that, helping with the computer lab back in the day? So a few people maybe. And then more recently, you helped us to update our kitchen, where we provide meals for young people in our programs and for community events. Does anybody remember the kitchen renovation work? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that also. You've sponsored a community conversations webinar that highlighted issues important in Boston's Black community. And you've raised money to restore pews in our historic meeting house, one in honor of Jim Staten and another in memory of Reverend Victor Carpenter. And now I'm very proud to tell you that your minister, Reverend Jablonski, serves on the board of directors at the Urban Ministry, and so we are even more deeply connected. I'm very grateful to friends from Belmont who've supported us, like Nanny Almquist, Ethel and Charles Heyman, Nancy and Mark Davis, Lee and Amy Ellsworth, Martha Spalding, Jim and Mary Louise Landfried, and Margaret Eagle. Thank you for all the ways that you support and sustain our work. It is good to be able to visit and to say that to you. So this morning, I wanted to share a trip that I took in September to the Canadian Rockies as I was reflecting on 10 years of ministry at the Urban Ministry. This fall marked my decade there. I hiked in a stunning landscape, thinking about what I've learned in this work, climbed up steep elevation, adjusted an awkward backpack, took in views of glaciers and azure blue water. It wasn't easy going up. I bruised toes coming down, but it was a wondrous trip. And I thought of how it is like the work for justice, bit by bit, sometimes hard and uncomfortable, and with unexpected gifts along the way. I looked back at arriving in Roxbury in November of 2014, when it became clear that the work before us was more than our programs. There was a core question beneath. How would we address racism in Greater Boston? We're an historically white-led organization in the heart of Boston's historic African-American community, and we're encircled by suburban white congregations who are reaching out to us to work with us for change. I was gripped by the challenge and also the potential, and how much I had to learn to get my arms around it. But before I could do that, before I could get my arms around it, I was called on to preach in pulpits like this. I brought no expertise that first season, no profound message. I brought questions. What did it mean to be a white-led organization in Roxbury? How do we forge real relationships across difference? How do we make change that really matters? And I began simply listening, learning, and following. In these 10 years, the police officers who killed Michael Brown were not indicted, sparking the Black Lives Matter movement. We witnessed the election of 2016 and the killing of George Floyd. White people were shaken out of a collective slumber. We learned that the waters of racism in the United States go deep. And the more that I've learned, the deeper the waters go. I first learned about health, wealth, and educational disparities that mean that Black people live poorer and die sooner than white people. There's a 23-year difference in life expectancy in Roxbury and Whiteback Bay, just 1 mile away. And the waters go deeper still. I learned about the racism that was baked into these systemic structures that birth those statistics, the prison, healthcare, and food systems. African Americans are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white people. Only half of African Americans have private health insurance versus 75% of white people. And 22% of Black people in the United States experience food insecurity, twice the rate of white people. And the waters grow colder. I learned how these systems are rooted in enslavement, how the police system grew out of slave patrols, how founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson were themselves enslavers whose economic well-being was secured through bondage, how after the Civil War, the prison system replaced enslavement as Blacks were charged with petty crimes and sentenced to hard labor, sometimes in the very same fields where plantations once stood. I learned that we cannot disentangle modern educational, housing, and economic systems from this history. Racism isn't a fistful of solvable problems, it's foundational. And to move forward in any meaningful way on our nation's and region's social ailments, we must face it together. I packed a book on my trip to the Rockies, the book that we heard from earlier, The Sum of Us by researcher Heather McGhee. She began her research after the 2016 election when many of us were asking, why did people not vote in their own self-interest? Does anybody remember asking that question? Why? She looked at the racism that had showed itself in that election and in our nation's political turmoil. Her thesis is this: our country's ongoing struggle for meaningful healthcare reform, positive economic change, even investment in infrastructure like roadways, our struggle to achieve collective good despite our abundant wealth and resources can be traced to enslavement. White people, McGhee writes, have been conditioned to believe in a zero-sum equation, that if people of color gain, we lose. And the stronger a person's racial resentment, the likelier to reject policies and investments that benefit all of us, including ourselves. McGee asserts that etched deeply into the white psyche is a value that is placed on whiteness. And when whites see black people in the swimming pool, we'd rather not have a pool than to be in it with them and erase the status conferred by that whiteness. And it is this deep-seated disfigurement of the white psyche that billionaire titans and political tacticians lean into with racist dog whistles to keep us separated and maintain their power and control. It especially harms people of color. That cannot be overstated, but it also doesn't serve any of us except a very few at the top. McGee writes, "Racism works against non-wealthy white Americans. It lowers their support for government actions that could help them economically out of a zero-sum fear that it could help the racialized undeserving as well," end quote. She draws a through line showing how this zero-sum thinking has collapsed unions that could advocate for all workers and has powered disinvestment of public services such as higher education. When more students of color began attending college, she writes, public funding dried up. College students of color 40 years ago were just 1 in 6. Now they're near half. Parallel to that rise in BIPOC students came cuts to per-student funding. In the past 30 years, public college tuition has almost tripled. She posits that it's why states like Texas refuse Medicare expansion, refusing what's basically free federal funding that would mean all rural Texans would have better access to hospital. The refusal is a fear that expanding public health care would draw and serve more people of color. Black people suffer the most from racism, but our whole human family is harmed. Solidarity, she says, is the answer. Solidarity is the answer. She quotes a longtime activist she met in her research. Quote, "If we didn't have these sharp divisions based on race, we could make enormous progress in terms of making sure that people are not hurting as badly as they are or deprived of what clearly are the necessities of life." And McGee continues, quote, "Over the years that I have sought answers to why a fairer economy is elusive, it has become clear to me that how white people understand what's right and wrong about our diverse nation, who belongs and who deserves, is determining our collective course. This is the crux of it. Can we swim together in the same pool or not? It's a political question, yes," she writes, "and one with economic ramifications, but at its core, it's a moral question. And it's a question for us as people of faith. I no longer believe that we can advance justice in the United States in a meaningful way without dealing with the history of enslavement and its inherited racism, not in fighting climate change or hunger. Racism cannot be separated from the rest of our social justice commitments because it's part and parcel of it. And that means that we must build connection and solidarity across race in Greater Boston. In our segregated world, that can seem daunting. But as people of faith, let us not be daunted. We are simply called to begin. We are called to do what we can in as many ways as we can for as long as we can. After 10 years at the Urban Ministry, I still bring to your pulpit no more expertise than when I began this work. But what I have is conviction that building relationships across race is foundational for all of our justice work. And I come to the same strategies as the year I arrived, To build real connections, those of us who are white need to listen and learn and follow. At the Urban Ministry, we listen to the community to guide us forward. In partnership with the Roxbury Historical Society, we began research into the history of enslavement by the congregation of First Church Roxbury, whose church and campus we inherited and inhabit. We published a report citing the names of 58 enslaved persons owned by First Church Roxbury congregants, with even the very first minister an enslaver. And we asked Roxbury community members to guide us forward from there. For the past years, neighbors have charted our course, seeking to learn more about the individual lives of those named in the report, in order to track their genealogy to find if there are descendants living in Roxbury today. It might seem that the urgency is confronting the racial injustices happening right now, and yes, that is important. But the Black community says this also matters: historic truth-telling, making the past visible, and deeply honoring the lives of those who were dishonored by our Unitarian Universalist ancestors. This matters urgently too. And we learn. For the past 5 years, we've held a series of webinar lectures called Community Conversations, in which we invite BIPOC leaders to speak to challenges facing the Black community in Boston. They've spoken on gentrification and displacement, educational inequity, the racial wealth gap, poor health outcomes. We learn for an ever-deepening understanding of past and present. We built a tours program led by local community members, highlighting the history of the community that we stand in. They tell stories such as how public art in Nubian Square grew out of the work of graffiti artists once targeted by the city, or of the history of the trees in the neighborhood and how essential the tree canopy is for communities like Roxbury, and how neighbors successfully fought a move to cut down all the trees on Melnia Cass Boulevard. BIPOC students in our after-school program design their own tours of the neighborhood, highlighting what matters most to them about their community. And they share these tours and stories with Unitarian Universalist youth from around the country. Young people share history and hope with other young people. And we follow. Our work in partnership has deepened over time. When the NAACP asked us to fill a bus to go to an action in Washington, D.C., Unitarian Universalists filled the bus. As the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute addresses violence in the city, we stand behind them, inviting congregation to join the Mother's Day Walk for Peace in Dorchester. When City Life Vita Urbana asks us to stuff envelopes, we stuff envelopes. We build solidarity by showing up again and again in the spirit of listening and learning. When you enter the doors of the UU Urban Ministry, you'll see on the wall a quote by Aboriginal activist Lila Watts, and it says, "If you are here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." These words resonate as a spiritual truth. But there's also a very concrete truth there too that the sum of us reminds us. The truth that until we grapple with the history of enslavement and racism and bridge our divides and commit to working in solidarity, we will not be free, any of us, of all that ails us. We need to work together. On my last long hike in the Canadian Rockies, we climbed up Larch Valley to Sentinel Pass, steadily making a 2,500-foot elevation gain to a stunning view, and then we began our descent. And as we descended, we came upon startled hikers warning that a grizzly bear was along the trail ahead. She was in a state of what is called hyperphagia, a trance-like focus on eating enough calories for winter. Our hike leaders reminded us of what is called for when faced with grave danger. Make noise, people, and stick together. And so we held close and began singing until we were safely through and the trail ended. That's what gets us through the hard and dangerous days ahead, friends. Let us sing loudly, reach out to the whole human family, and stick together. And may it be so, and amen.